It's 8 o'clock, so we can start now. So, who will read? We have to read it, no?
No, we have to read
Rangata, we
it.
have read it.
Okay, if you have read it,
We
then
have
I will
read
read
it.
it. Okay, okay. So I'm reading each sentence, all right? The movement which will lead us out of the disturbances of the lower nature must be necessarily a movement towards equality. Equality in the mind, in the emotional temperament, in the soul. So the equality has to be in the mind, in the vital, emotional temperament, and in the soul. Okay? We may feel that the soul is divine and perfectly always perfect. No, that's a wrong idea, because the soul has come down into the inconscient, into matter, and has forgotten that it is divine, and it is identifying itself in the body mind life. Therefore, even the soul has to recover its equality and its sense of divinity. Okay? And before that, he has told us the three gunas which are there. I am reading out the earlier one. But if we rest eternally on this plane, the Madhyama Gati of the Gita, our ascent remains unfinished. The evolution of the soul incomplete. Through the sattvic being and nature to that which is beyond the three gunas, lies the way of the soul to perfection. So you have to first of all go from the tamas to the vital, that is rajas, and from rajas you have to climb to the sattva, and from sattva you have to go even higher up for equality. Okay? While you are in the three gunas, it is not possible to have equality. You can make a forced equality in the mind, but it's not permanent. To a certain extent, you may be able to control, but the control of the mind over the vital is not possible at level 1. It's not possible. So that's what Shabda is saying. I am reading the sentence again. Okay. The movement which will lead us out of the disturbance of the lower nature. What are the disturbances of the lower nature? The sattva, rajas, tamas. These are the lower nature. Must be necessarily a movement towards equality in the mind, that is sattvic, the emotional, rajasic, and the soul. Okay, the soul is a spiritual. Okay, so
Rangata, soul here is a psychic being, no?
yes,
Soul.
yes. But even the psychic, you don't know the psychic, no? Okay.
Yes.
Psychic also, when it comes forward, it starts purifying the the body mind life. It starts purifying. First, you have to be very clear about this. The change, psychological change that takes place in yoga comes first in the inner being, and then it comes out into the outer being. The inner being is the first to transform. The outer may not be transformed. In fact, that's exactly what happens. Huh? When the soul is purified enough, it goes up into the second level. But the first level, the body mind life remains imperfect. So all change, psychological change, takes place first in the inner being, okay, not the outer. So the soul also is in delusion, and the soul has to recover it has to become now subject not to moha, but to its own nature. I'm reading the next sentence. But it is to be noted that although in the end we must arrive at a superiority to all the three gunas of the lower nature, it is yet in its incipience by a resort to one or other of the three that the movement must begin. So he's saying that ultimately we have to go beyond the three gunas, but you start the practice of equality with any of the one gunas. Okay? And he's going to describe here the different grades of equality in the tamas, the sattva, and the rajas. The combination of all. In this paragraph, he is going to describe one by one. There can be a tamasic equality. There can be a rajasic equality. There can also be a sattvic equality. And the spiritual equality is above in level 2. Okay? So that's what he's going to describe. But it is to be noted that although in the end we must arrive at a superiority to the three gunas of the lower nature, level 1, it is in its incipience. Incipient means beginning. Okay, when it is just beginning. Okay, you have to start with either the tamasic or the rajasic or the sattvic. He's going to describe that. The beginning of equality may be sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. Or there is a possibility in the human nature of a tamasic equality. He's going to describe that. It may be purely tamasic, the heavy equability of a vital temperament rendered inertly irresponsive to the shocks of existence by a sort of dull insensitivity, undesirous of the joy of life. So, in other words, one who is in a tamasic condition, if he is sleeping, you wake him up, give him a blow also, he won't wake up. Okay? That is, you can say the tamasic equality is insensitivity. Okay? You can say that. Suppose you insult somebody who is at the tamasic level, he may not even understand what you are saying. So he remains absolutely unaffected. But that's a negative equality. It's not positive equality. Okay, so that's what I'm saying here. Note the words carefully. Heavy equability of a vital temperament rendered inertly irresponsible. Inertly, okay? Irresponsive to the shocks of existence by a sort of dull insensitivity, undesirous of the joy of life. He just wants to remain where he is. He is not at all interested even in joy of life. Okay? So that is the tamasic equality. Or it may result from a weariness of the emotions and desires accumulated by surfeit and satiety of the pleasures, or else, on the contrary, a disappointment and a disgust and shrinking from the pain of life, a lassitude, a fear and horror and dislike of the world. So all these also can give you a tamasic equality. You don't care anymore. You tried and you failed, and you see that it's impossible to get what you want in the physical world. Either it can be through satisfaction of desire, you have had enough, and you then say it's all right, I don't care now anymore. Or you have not been able to satisfy your desires, and in disgust you get away from it. So obviously, this is not the real equality, but if you interpret equality as not being affected, then the tamasic equality can count as a equality. Otherwise, it is insensitivity. That's all. You are not reacting at all because of insensitivity and unconsciousness. Okay? Now, or it may result from a weariness of the emotions. You've had enough of it and you are tired of it. Weariness of emotions and desires. And how does that come? Accumulated by surfeit and excess and satiety. You have satisfied yourself fully. In fact, more than satisfied. Satiety is more than satisfaction of the pleasure, or else, on the contrary, a disappointment and a disgust and shrinking from the pain of life, a lassitude. Lassitude, the word is tiredness, okay? Lassitude, a fear and horror and dislike of the world. All these things, you will just go away and say, I don't care for the world anymore. So you won't be, you will be, continue to be affected, but you sort of pretend not to be affected. You don't care for anymore. So that's the tamasic equality. It's not very easy to, it's almost like a contradiction. Okay, a tamasic equality is almost a contradiction in itself. It's not real equality. It is just a non-response. What is calling here? He is calling it inertly irresponsive. If you are, that's a tamasic equality. I go to the next sentence. Not sentence, I have to go to the other. On the contrary, a disappointment and a disgust and shrinking from the pain of life, a lassitude, a fear and horror and dislike of the world. The next phrase, it is then in its nature a mixed movement, rajaso tamasic, but the lower quality predominates. Rajaso, why? Because you are rejecting. When you are rejecting, it's a movement of the vital. So that's why it is the rajaso tamasic. But the lower quality predominates. That is to say, there is no response. Okay. Even a very hard slap you give to somebody who is absolutely in that condition, he will wonder why you have slapped him, but he won't react. Okay. So that's what Sam is saying. The lower quality predominates, the non-responsiveness, or approaching the sattvic principle, it may aid itself by the intellectual perception that the desires of life cannot be satisfied, that the soul is too weak to master life, that the whole thing is nothing but sorrow and transient effort, and nowhere in it is there any real truth of sanity or light or happiness. It's a recoil from the difficulties of life. That's what Sandhu is saying. It's a negative way of saying equal. And nowhere in it is there any real truth or sanity or light or happiness. This is the sattva tamasic principle of equality, and is not so much equality. There you are. It is not so much equality, though it may lead to that, as indifference or equal refusal. So I'm going to use a very interesting phrase, equal refusal. You are refusing everything, sorrow and pain, but also pleasure. We have had enough of pleasure and doesn't satisfy you anymore. So equal refusal. Interesting phrase. It may lead to that as indifference, or you may become indifferent. So there is an element of equality in it, but the element of unconsciousness and irresponsiveness is much more. Essentially, the movement of tamasic equality is a generalization of nature's principle of jugupsa. Jugupsa is the withdrawal from anything. Okay? You feel disgusted and you withdraw from the physical world. So that's what Shendra is explaining. The tamasic equality is a jugupsa. It is a withdrawal from the physical world, or self-protecting recoil extended from the shunning of particular painful effects to a shunning of the whole life of nature itself, as in some, leading to pain and self-tormenting, and not to the delight which the soul demands. So, very clearly what he has said is, he has explained tamasic equality. Either you have had too much of pleasure, and now you say, I've had enough now. I don't want to indulge in these pleasures anymore. Or you may not have been satisfied, and you get away from it by jugupsa, by a disgust. This is the tamasic equality. Now again, we will explain more in the tamasic equality. So, and it's a big para, 1-page para. So we will read. Who will read? One of you has to read. Can Sunki, can you read? Sunki is not reacting.
I can read.
Sarika,
Yeah.
Sarika, you can read. Okay, go ahead, read. In tamasic equality.
In tamasic equality, by itself, there is no real liberation, but it can be made a powerful starting point. If, as in Indian asceticism, it is turned into the sattvic by the perception of the greater existence, the true power, the higher delight of the immutable self above nature. The natural turn of such a movement, however, is towards sannyasa, the renunciation of life and works, rather than to that union of inner renunciation of desire with continued activity in the world of nature which the Gita advocates. The Gita, however, admits and makes room for this movement. It allows, as a recoiling starting point, the perception of the defects of the world existence, birth and disease and death and old age and sorrow. The historic starting point of the Buddha, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha,
Doshanu darshan.
Doshanu Darshanam, and it accepts the effort of those whose self-discipline is motivated by a desire for release, even in this spirit, from the curse of age and death, jara, marana, moksha, mam, astriya, yatantiye. But that to be of any profit must be accompanied by the sattvic perception of a higher state and the taking delight and refuge in the existence of the divine. Mam ashritya. Then the soul by its recoil comes to a greater condition of being, lifted beyond the three gunas and free from birth and death and age and grief, and enjoys the immortality of its self-existence. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Dukkhair. Vimukto Mritam Ashnute.
Yeah.
The tamasic unwillingness to accept the pain and effort of life is indeed by itself a weakening and degrading thing. And in this lies the danger of preaching to all alike the gospel of asceticism and world disgust, that it puts the stamp of a tamasic weakness and shrinking on unfit souls, confuses their understanding. Buddhi bhedam janayet, diminishes the sustained aspiration, the confidence in living, the power of effort which the soul of man needs for its salutary, its necessary rajasic struggle to master its environment without really opening to it, for it is yet incapable of that. A higher goal, a greater endeavor, a mightier victory. But in souls that are fit, this tamasic recoil may serve a useful spiritual purpose by slaying their rajasic attraction, their eager preoccupation with the lower life, which prevents the sattvic awakening to a higher possibility. Seeking then for a refuge in the void they have created, they are able to hear the divine call. O soul, that findest thyself in this transient and unhappy world, turn and put thy delight in me. Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasva mam.
So you can very clearly see now, when they are explaining how even a tamasic recoil from the physical world can lead to a spiritual life. Okay, you are disgusted with the incompetence and the falsehood and all, and you recoil, you get back from it and say, nothing will happen in this world. I don't want to have anything with this world. It's a negative starting point, but still it can lead to sannyasa. Okay, it can lead to a complete giving up of the physical. So you can get to a spiritual life with this tamasic equality. And tamasic equality, he has told you, either by over satisfaction or by under satisfaction. When you don't. We'll look at each sentence carefully and see what he says. In tamasic equality, by itself, there is no real liberation. Very clear. Okay. There is a sort of non-responsiveness, but it's not really a positive equality at all. It's a negative equality. You're just not reacting because you're not interested anymore. I've had enough. I've seen all this leads to nothing at all. So I withdraw. Okay. So that is, and he has also given you, in a certain sense, Buddha's starting point. He sees in the physical world death, old age, and disease. And he gets so disgusted that he withdraws from the world. So this also is a starting point for the tamasic equality. Now, in tamasic equality by itself, there is no real liberation, but it can be made a powerful starting point if, as in Indian asceticism, it is turned into the sattvic by the perception of the greater existence, the true power, the higher delight of the immutable self about nature. So if you can take advantage of this negative equality and see, oh, this world can never satisfy me, but is there something which can satisfy me? Then the soul which is ready can enter into a spiritual life through the negative door. Okay, through the negative door. But anyway, it's a door. That's what Sweden is pointing out. It is turned into the sattvic by the perception of a greater existence, the truer power, the higher delight of an immutable self about nature. All the things of the physical world are not giving me any satisfaction. Can something really give me permanent satisfaction? Then you can graduate to the spiritual life. The natural turn of such a movement, however, is towards sannyasa, giving up the physical world, the renunciation of life and works, rather than to that union of inner renunciation of desire, which continued activity in the world of nature, which the Gita advocates. The Gita is saying, don't give up the physical world, but give up your desires. Desire, attachment, and ego, these three things, if you give up, then you will have equality. It's a positive way, but not the physical renunciation of life. Physical renunciation of life is not recommended in the Gita. The Gita, however, admits and makes room for this movement. So it does accept a tamasic record. It allows as a recoiling starting point the perception of the defects of the world existence, birth and death and old age and sorrow, the historic starting point of the Buddha. You have a very clear, loud example of the Buddha giving up the physical world because of the experience of having seen these three things for the first time in his life: disease, death, and what?
Old age.
Disease, old age. That's right. These three things. And so, the historic starting point of the Buddha. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha, Dosha, Anudarshana. Janma, birth. Birth into an imperfect world. Mrityu, okay? Mrityu, death. Jara, old age. Vyadhi, disease. Dukkha, sorrow. Dosha, Anudarshana. Dosha. The world's doshas, Anudarshanam, very keen observation of the defects in the physical world, and these are the defects. And it accepts the effort of those whose self-discipline is motivated by a desire for release, even in the spirit of tamasic equality, from the curse of age and death, jara, marana, mokshaya. Okay, I want to get rid of jara and marana, and I want liberation, mokshaya. Mam ashritya yatanti ye. Those who try, depending on me, says the Gita, Mam ashritya, depending on me, those who try to get liberation by giving up jara and marana, who try for that, yatanti ye, those who try. But that to be of any profit must be accompanied by the sattvic perception of a higher state and the taking delight and refuge in the existence of the divine, Mam Ashritya. Because if it's only the tamasic recoil and its negativity, insensitivity, and dissatisfaction, you will never go to spiritual life. You will end up being even worse. But if this starting point makes you think that what is there that can give me satisfaction? What is there something better than this? I can try for it. That will lead you to a spiritual life of sannyasa. then the soul, by its recoil, comes to a greater condition of being, lifted beyond the three gunas and free from birth and death and old age and grief, enjoys the immortality of its self-existence. Janma mrityu jara dukhair vimukto amritam ashnute. By giving up these, you get immortality, you enjoy immortality. Note interestingly enough also that the Raman Maharshi's giving up the physical world, even his clothes, was not prompted by a tamasic recoil. It was not tamasic recoil. It was just that he had the experience of the self. And it was so wonderful that he says that this is worth having, and he gave up everything to do. So in his case, it is certainly not tamasic recoil, although he didn't give up the world. Ultimately, he never gave up the world because he came down. He wanted to, but he was not allowed to. So he came down from the hill and stayed below and helped everybody. So his is not, he was a positive giving up. So there also, giving up of the physical world can be positive as well as negative. Negative by dissatisfaction and over-satiation, over-satisfaction. But in his case, it was not. He had a glimpse of the self. Very, very young age, at the age of 16, he had this glimpse of the self. And it was so wonderful that that's what he was pursuing. So in his case, very clearly, it's not tamasic recoil. Okay? I'm going to the next sentence. The tamasic unwillingness to accept the pain and effort of life is indeed by itself a weakening and a degrading thing. And in this lies the danger of preaching to all alike the gospel of asceticism and world disgust, that it puts a stamp of a tamasic weakness and shrinking on unfit souls, confuses their understanding, buddhi vedam janayet, okay? But let it not engender buddhi vedam, the confusion in the mind, okay? So, because those who are unfit also, and they give up the physical world, then it's nothing. They are getting neither the world nor the spiritual life. That's a danger. That's why the Gita says actually, buddhi vedam na janayet. Let it not. The man who is already wise, let him not create this confusion in the mind of the unfit. Then diminishes strength. Yes.
At some point, it will be like that, no? At some point, when you are in the transition, it will be like that, no?
What do you mean by like that?
No. When you are neither sure of the world, being in the world, and not sure of going to that stage, how will you cross? This buddhi vedam.
I gave you the example of by the way, he is only talking of the renunciation of the world. Huh? There are any number of people who don't renounce the world and still do yoga. So don't keep that very clearly in your mind. Okay? Earlier, the ascetic impulse was there, but in Raman Maharshi's case, it was not negative. So, but if you are starting from the tamasic recoil, yes, what you're saying is right. If you're starting from the tamasic recoil, but you don't need to start from tamasic recoil. You can start from a rajasic recoil. You can start from a sattvic recoil also. We will discuss all these in the next paras. Okay? In fact, the next para is rajasic equality. Okay? He is discussing here only the tamasic recoil. And the best example is Buddha. Okay? Although there also it was a recoil, but it was not a recoil in a sense of disgust. He saw Doshanu Darshanam, a keen observation of this life is full of defects. Okay? But there is no strong dislike. Buddha said, I have to find a solution for this. These defects are there in the physical world. Is it possible to remain in the physical world without these defects? So I would think that in Buddha's case, certainly it was not a real tamasic recoil. It's a starting point, but not real tamasic recoil. There was a desire for a solution. It's more positive than negative.
So the line that he says, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasvamam, that is not tamasic.
No, that's right. No, that is advice to the tamasic recoil. But actually, it's not given in that context. Anityam asukam lokamimam prapya bhajasvamam. Bhajasvamam is certainly not the, but it can be the starting point. Those who are, in fact, the Gita is advising, if you are really dissatisfied with the anityam and the asukam lokam, that means to say it is full of suffering and transience, then you come to me. Okay? So it is
So
advising.
No, but it
Yeah.
is a tamasic recoil only, no? That also. Or not?
Pardon?
That's my question. That is my question, whether it is a tamasic recoil or not at that time.
Oh, it depends on the individual. Huh? So to someone who is in a tamasic recoil, this advice is certainly good. Okay. Anityam asukam lokamem prapya bhajasoma. But if someone is very keenly, okay, note that word anudarshanam, very keen sense of observation that the world is unreal without getting depressed, okay, without getting depressed and disgusted, then also this advice will be suitable. Okay. Anityam asukam lokamem prapya bhajasoma. Come to me and worship me. Okay. In fact, these are all, we can't make very strict rules. Each individual has a different approach. But Sridhar is discussing all the gradations. Very clearly, he is discussing the gradations. So, Gita is saying, those who are not ready, okay, don't preach asceticism to them because they'll get neither the world nor the spiritual fruit. It's a dangerous thing. Buddhi Vedam na janaye. Here, Sridhar is using na, he is not put because it's he is stating it as another. His construction sentence does not need that na janaye. I go to the next one. Okay. Tamasic weakness and shrinking of on unfit souls confuses their understanding. Buddhivedam janaye diminishes the sustained aspiration, confidence in living, power of effort which the soul of man needs for his salutary, that's a positive, the necessary rajasic struggle to master its environment without really opening to it, for it is yet incapable of that, a higher goal, a greater endeavor, a mightier victory. So, but in souls, now we're coming to the another case, okay? But in souls that are fit for tamasic recoil, but in souls that are fit, this tamasic recoil may serve as a useful spiritual purpose by slaying their rajasic attraction, their eager preoccupation with the lower life, which prevents the sattvic awakening to a higher possibility. So if you are a very vital person and you want satisfaction all the time and you are not getting satisfaction, okay, then you can turn to the spiritual life. So it can be useful. A tamasic recoil can be useful in those who are ready. That's what Sridhar pointed out. But in souls that are fit, this tamasic recoil may serve as a useful spiritual purpose by slaying their rajasic attraction, their eager preoccupation with the lower life, which prevents the sattvic awakening to a higher possibility. You give up the rajasic pursuits of your desires because you find that they can never be satisfied. So then you graduate to the spiritual life. Seeking then for a refuge in the void they have created, they are able to hear the divine call, O soul that findest thyself in this transient world, unhappy world, turn and put thy delight in me. Srivada's translation is a very flexible translation. It's not a literal translation, but a literary translation. Okay, so the time is 8:35. We have got 5 minutes. We can read the next one, which is a Rajasic equality. He now describes the Rajasic equality. Then the next paragraph is the Sattvic equality. One by one, he is taking up all these. Okay? We can just read it. We'll read it. Still in this movement.
Yes,
So,
shall I read?
yes, go ahead.
Okay. Still in this movement, the equality consists only in an equal recoil from all that constitutes the world, and it arrives at indifference and aloofness, but does not include that power to accept equally all the touches of the world, pleasurable or painful, without attachment or disturbance, which is a necessary element in the discipline of the Gita. Therefore, even if we begin with the tamasic recoil, which is not at all necessary, it can only be as the first incitement to a greater endeavor, not a permanent permission. The real discipline begins with the movement to mastery over these things, from which we were first inclined merely to flee. It is here that the possibility of a kind of Rajasic equality comes in, which is at its lowest and strong nature's pride in self-mastery, self-control, superiority to passion and weakness. But the Stoic ideal seizes upon this point of departure and makes it the key to an entire liberation of the soul from subjection to all weakness of its lower nature. As the tamasic inward recoil is a generalization of nature's principle of jugupsa, or self-protection from suffering, so the Rajasic upward movement is a generalization of nature's other principle of the acceptance of struggle and effort, and the innate impulse of life towards mastery and victory. But it transfers the battle to the field where alone complete victory is possible. Instead of a struggle for scattered outward aims and transient success, it proposes nothing less than the conquest of nature and the world itself by a spiritual struggle and an inner victory. The tamasic recoil turns from both the pains and pleasures of the world to flee from them. The Rajasic movement turns upon them to bear, master, and ride superior to them. The Stoic self-discipline calls desire and passion into its embrace of the wrestler and crushes them between its arms, as did old Dhritarashtra in the epic of the iron image of Bhima. It endures the shock of things, painful and pleasurable, the causes of the physical and mental affections of the nature, and breaks their effects to pieces. It is complete when the soul can bear all touches without being pained or attained, excited or troubled. It seeks to make man the conqueror and king of his nature.
So this is the Rajasic recoil of the Rajasic equality. In other words, when you see all the problems of the physical world, instead of running away from them, which is the tamasic equality, you confront them and conquer them. That's a Rajasic attitude. So he's given a very interesting image of the Dhritarashtra when he is seeing that all his sons are no good and are not succeeding. He calls that Bhima and he crushes. But Bhima knows. Sri Krishna has told him that you are going to be crushed, so don't go. Put rather an image, a metal image of yourself. And Dhritarashtra is blind and he crushes that image altogether. It says Rajasic, not recoil, but facing the problem and conquering them. This is the Rajasic. And then you get equality. And then after 2 paragraphs more, he will go to the Sattvic equality. So we can stop here today and we'll do this next time. The Rajasic equality.
Thank you, Rangada.
Okay. And all this analysis, yeah.
Thank you, Dada.
Yeah. The analysis is fantastic. What Shraddha is given, Sattvic, Rajasic, so many different cases he has given, all the gradations he has given. Okay. See you on Tuesday for
Thank you,
synthesis.
Rangada.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.